my friends. It is your friendly neighborhood Jerry Rasco here again with another Spider-Man art review. Today we are going to be looking at another issue of the Amazing Spider-Man. This one is Amazing Spider-Man number 5. So just to go back a little bit for anybody who's new, who's just seeing this video for the first time. I have been creating this series of videos to look back at the Amazing Spider-Man comic book run, starting with the beginning, starting with Amazing Fantasy 15, the first appearance of Spider-Man, and talking about the art of the comic books, a little bit about the process, how comic books are made, some of the thought process that goes behind making comic books and the choices, talking, of course, about Spider-Man, the character, the stories, etc. And so we have an interesting one today. So far with the Amazing Spider-Man and the beginning of this series, we've seen a lot of creation. We've seen new stuff, new characters, new villains, new scenarios, adding new tropes to the Spider-Man mythos that last for decades, things like that. Well, today, there's a little change from that process, and we're going to see Spider-Man dealing with an existing Marvel character who just hasn't made an appearance in his book yet, but does exist with other characters. So that's an interesting little change in regards to the process and the thought so far. So it'll be interesting to see that. Let's cut over to the book and let's jump right in. So this is the cover to the Amazing Spider-Man number 5. As I mentioned in my other videos, if you've watched them, again, thank you so much for checking out that playlist and enjoying these. If you haven't, if this is your first foray into my Spider-Man videos, let me explain. This is a PDF or scanned copy of an original Amazing Spider-Man number 5. Not my copy. I certainly could not afford something like this. But obviously I have the file, and so we can look at this. This is what it looks like if you had it today. Obviously it is aged some, so there's some yellowing and the color has changed a little bit, but for the most part what we're seeing here is the exact comic book as it would have been off the shelf. So that includes all the ads, the page breaks, all that kind of stuff in there. Real quick, I do just want to talk about the Marvel method again. I think I've mentioned it in an earlier video possibly, or one of my other art tutorial videos on my channel. But let me explain that to anybody who's new or not a comic book aficionado per se. So there's a thing called the Marvel method, and this was developed by Stan Lee and the artists that he worked with. People like Jack Kirby, people like Steve Ditko, who drew Spider-Man. And what they would do is somebody would come up with what is referred to as the plot of the story. So that is the bones, the basic framework of what's going to happen in this issue. Now that could be Stan Lee, that could be Steve Ditko, or it could be the two of them working together, maybe having a conversation in the office or a conversation over the phone, something like that. So somebody turns and says, hey, you know what would be neat? We've seen the Fantastic Four has made some appearances in Spider-Man. What if Spidey had to deal with Doctor Doom? And at this point in time, Doctor Doom would have been the preeminent villain in the Marvel universe. So somebody goes, oh, hey, I got a cool idea. Let's have Spidey fight Doctor Doom. That would be neat. Instead of creating a new villain of the month, let's do that. And then, so it could be as simple as that, or it could be as detailed as, hey, Spidey has to fight Doctor Doom. Maybe he has to save somebody that Doctor Doom has captured in order to get him to draw Spidey in, and then Spidey beats him, and just as it kind of comes to a draw, the Fantastic Four show up and Doom runs away because there's too many heroes, and then that's the story, right? So it could be very simple, it could be more detailed, but somebody comes up with the plot, and then the artist goes and says, okay, I have a certain number of pages in every comic book. Usually in today's comics, it's somewhere between 20 to 22 pages of storytelling. If you have independent creators like myself, I get to make comics with as many pages as I want, and no advertisements. So, for my own comics, I've been doing 40-page comic books to give you a lot more story. Here, they're limited, so maybe 20 to 22 pages. So you've got to break out your how many pages are going to be setup, how many pages are going to be action, how many pages are the conclusion. And then the artist would draw it. Then that would go back to Stan Lee, and Stan would then write in all of the word balloons and the dialogue to fit what the art was, and pull the story together from a dialogue standpoint. Now, this was done for convenience. If Stan, he was one guy basically writing all of the comics for Marvel Comics at the time. And so he just didn't have the time to write a full script and write all the dialogue out and plan it all ahead. He needed the artists to be the storytellers and then him to come in and sort of pull it all together. We'll see an example of that in this one that's very clear where the two weren't on the same page, figuratively, I guess, and then literally on the page. So we'll talk about that and go through. But let's real quick talk about the colors and the cover. So Spidey, and a nice action cover, very cool. Fans who are maybe Fantastic Four fans who read that comic are going to see this. They know Doctor Doom. This might lead them to buy the comic. That might be another reason why you would do it, to expand your audience. But nice again, the colors. So everything here except for Spider-Man is different than him. Meaning, Doom is green and gray. The blasts that he's shooting are yellow. The background is gray, yellow, and green. All of these things being different than Spider-Man help Spidey really pop out. He becomes very vibrant. I mean, even with this comic being as old as it is, those red colors still really pop off that page. And that's an important thing for somebody doing a comic book cover. You need to, in a glance, without anybody having to read it, open it up, anything, you want to capture their eyes, their visual attention, and get their interest, and then they're going to explore and find out what this is. So it's a good cover. Again, the colors really help sell it and what it is. Over time, of course, it's a little muddy, and some of that could be the scan, some of that could be age, etc. But still, for the time, great cover. We start with our splash page. This has been a theme that we've seen throughout these Spider-Man comic books that we've looked at, where it starts with a splash page. This one's a little different. Some of the splash pages, if you see my previous episode about the Sandman issue, number 4, I thought that the splash page itself inside could have been the cover. In fact, would have been better than the cover. This one wouldn't make a great cover because of all the stuff around the outside, that border, but I did find that really interesting. And one of the things that I've heard from different books and different research that I've done into the history of comics, and specifically Marvel comics, and I don't remember who the quote is attributed to, but somebody said, it might have been Stan, or it might have been one of the other editors-in-chief, Jim Shooter, at one time. But somebody said every comic book, you have to treat every comic book like it is somebody's first comic book. So there's a chance that somebody has not read Spider-Man 1 through 4, but they go to the newsstand or the spinner rack in the grocery store or the pharmacy or wherever they get them, the convenience store, and they see this. And like I said, maybe they're a Fantastic Four fan, and they go, ooh, Doctor Doom. That's cool. I like Doctor Doom. So they pick this up. So they need to know some of the basics and information about Spider-Man. So here they're introducing the main characters and sort of the rogues gallery of Spider-Man. So you have introducing that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. You have Doom. You have J. Jonah Jameson that features in the story, and Betty Brant, who's not really big in this story, but she plays a bigger role in Spider-Man's life later. All the kids that he goes to school with, specifically Flash Thompson. There's another Spider-Man in this story, and of course the Fantastic Four. So this is a great way for somebody who flips the cover to give them a brief intro on, here's some of the players that you're going to be seeing in this comic if you're not familiar with it. So nice idea, really neat. And again, something that we all, I think, forget in modern times with uh, the comic book continuity and how it's broken up into almost like chapters. Comics very seldom today are a complete story in and of themselves, right? It's an ongoing storyline. And but remembering that every comic is somebody's first comic somewhere is an important lesson. So if you've seen, I say this all the time in my videos, if you've seen my earlier videos, because I'm going to reference things that I have maybe mentioned in earlier videos as well. So this grid structure of how the story is told, again, very consistent with what we've seen in the earlier Spider-Man comic books. Um, it is still a throwback to newspaper comic strips of having, kind of equal sized um, panels that you can put in a horizontal orientation to read them from left to right in a newspaper. Here, they're stacked up. We're not seeing the different page compositions that we would see later. We'll get there in time through this series, but for now, it's not quite there. Um, and we'll get into that as we begin to see it. There are artistic methods that we use now, and obviously it's not brand new now. It's been around for a long time, but to move the reader's eye through the page in a sort of Z fashion. That's how we read in the Western world, from top left across, down left, down left, or right. So left to right, left to right, left to right. And we want to move the reader's eye through that page. And you do that by using visual cues to help. Here, for example, at the bottom of this page, the main focus of this image is Dr. Doom's hand that's coming in from the right to the left. Really, to move your eye from the panel before it to this panel and possibly to the next page, you might want to flip that. If you had a mirror image of that and the hand was coming from the off screen from the left to the right, that would draw, because we're looking here at Peter Parker. He's in the foreground. He's talking about how mad he is at Flash Thompson, but he can't do anything about it because it's Spider-Man. He'd kill the guy if he ever punched him, so he's got to exhibit control. But you have his spider sense tingles sort of are here. That could lead your eye from here to here, and then from here down if you had that hand coming across that way. It's a small choice. It doesn't really affect the overall storytelling of the book, but it's just something that it illustrates the ever evolving methodology that artists use to tell stories in comics. So, not much going on this page, just kind of setting up, is Spider-Man good? Who likes Spider-Man? Who doesn't like Spider-Man? Of course, that's part of the tropes that go along, is that Spider-Man, J. Jonah Jameson, the Daily Bugle owner and editor and publisher, he doesn't like Spider-Man, so he tries to get people to not like him. Flash Thompson, on the other hand, is a huge fan of Spider-Man, but not knowing that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, hates Peter Parker. There's your interesting triangle between, it's not a love triangle, but a triangle between Flash, Peter, and Spider-Man as characters. Interesting. So here we have Dr. Doom. He is in his, making plans. There's a little recap, and you can tell by the use of the sort of bubbly, cloudy panel borders that that's a memory. So that's cool. And this is a trope of early Doctor Doom. We've seen this with Doctor Doom trying to recruit people to help him beat the Fantastic Four, right? Because it's 1-on-4. As strong as he is and as powerful as he is, back in these early days, he feels like he still needs some help. So he's tried to recruit the Hulk. He's tried to recruit Namor, the Submariner. And now he's going to try to recruit Spider-Man. Because, again, J. Jonah Jameson is telling the world that Spider-Man is a bad guy. Spider-Man's a villain. Spider-Man's terrible. And so he's like, maybe he's not such a good guy. Maybe he would partner up with me to help me meet my ends. So that's a trope that we see with Doctor Doom that kind of fades away. Modern Doctor Doom is very arrogant. He needs no one. He is the leader of an entire nation. He stands alone. Um, so here he's using a spider and his technology and gadgets and things to try to communicate with Spider-Man through his spider sense. But how does Doctor Doom know about his spider sense? I don't. The two haven't interacted. I don't know that that's public knowledge. So, but that's okay. We know, the readers know, the writers know. We can kind of let it go a little bit. Let's see here. So Peter's spider sense picks up the message while he's in his room. And interesting little foreshadowing. He is in here practicing with his web spinning. So he's making some, I'll zoom in a little bit. He's making different kinds of weird shapes with the webs and spinning them around and almost like juggling and stuff. Important because we'll see this come in later. So far in the series, we've seen Spider-Man, I think he's made a parachute. Normally, he just uses lines, like he'll web from line to line. He may have created a web bolo to trip somebody up one time. We're going to see a lot more web skills in this issue from Spidey. I really like this one, even though the panel is the exact same size as these other ones. This one stood out to me. I really like this swinging pose. We'll see some other swinging poses, which are really look kind of like a person with a rope. I mean, it fantastical, but still a person with a rope. But this one, he's letting go and sort of flying through the air at the end of a leap, or the apex of his swing. There's buildings below. Nice angle diagonally across the panel, makes it more energetic, more alive, and again, also sort of helps with bringing the eye through the page, and of course the overlapping. So overlapping is a big thing. I've again talked about it in some other videos, but comic books are made on a two-dimensional surface, a flat 2D paper surface. So how do you show depth in something like that? And one of the easiest ways to do that is to overlap your images. So here you have this web strand. Now, it doesn't have to be in the front. It could be coming off his hand and just being next to him. But by overlapping his leg, that shows that that's closer to us. Spidey is further than that web, so that creates some depth there, essentially as an optical illusion. And then the city is below there, so behind him, and he's overlapping these buildings, so that's even further away. So combined with things like scale, making things further smaller, color, you make things like in the city here, it's all sort of a drab tan or brown color, where Spidey is bright. Things that are closer to you are brighter. The further they get, the duller the color gets. So these are ways to create depth in a very small panel, in a very small space. We see that again here with Doctor Doom. This is, he's standing looking at, this piece of equipment and just sort of musing to himself. But Steve Ditko draws these, I don't know, pipes, cables, something from this piece of equipment that slightly overlaps his arm. And again, all it does is just create a little more depth and create a little more space. So very nice. And then also this one here at the bottom, the same thing. Spidey overlapping the building, overlapping the window, in the window frame, overlapping Doom, who's in front of the lines on the floor. Just a great way of creating multiple levels. So important in every image you do to think about creating those multiple levels of depth. So here they have some initial conversations. Of course, Spidey declines because he's a good guy, and he's going to show Doom that he's no pushover, and he goes to web him up. But that's not the real Doctor Doom. That's a robot. That is a Doctor Doom trope that has lasted throughout the history of the character. Doctor Doom has these autonomous robots that act just like him, that you can't tell the difference. And so anytime Doctor Doom gets beaten, it looks like he's dead, he's in a building that's exploded, whatever it is, you can always just chalk it up to it was a Doombot. And so here's that trope here. So really cool. It's just a robot that looks and sounds like Doctor Doom. So neat trope, and something that, again, if you're a fan of comics, Fantastic Four, or Marvel in general, you'll see Doom bots show up a lot throughout the history. Let's see here. Oh, so this one, I tried looking it up on the internet and I couldn't find it. I know that there's a term for this, and I forget what it is called, and I couldn't find it. Everything I looked up and trying to explain what I was looking for came up with, oh, you're talking about animation or film, or where you're using multiple images to create motion. That's not what obviously we're doing here, but we are using multiple images to create that motion. So you could just have the motion lines, these what we call motion lines, or action lines. So showing that Spidey is leaping from this hole, that the trapdoor that has fallen out below him. But by doing these little very undetailed, again, I'll zoom in here on this one panel because I think it's pretty neat. And I don't know that we've seen it in a Spidey comic that we've talked about so far in this series. But this is a great way, and something we see a lot in Spider-Man comics, see a lot in comics in general, but Spider-Man comics are great because he's such an active, acrobatic character. You want to show him flipping and jumping and moving, but in a static image, it might just look like he's upside down. How did he get there? So neat to show this, again, very undetailed, very simplified, and the color being lighter as well. Pushes it, like we just talked about, pushes it into the background, and we understand as readers, it's almost like an after image. Like, like if you blinked your eyes real fast, that's what it would look like, and then you'd see the real Spidey. So he places his hands, then he flips over backwards and comes around and ends up leaping to grapple and jump onto Doctor Doom to tackle him. So I love this. Again, this is something we see a lot in Spidey comics. You see it in Daredevil comics. You see it in Batman comics. Anybody who's sort of acrobatic, fast-moving character, that is a great way, simple but easy, to show that motion. Not just the end of the motion, but the mechanics of that motion and how they got from point A to point B. So again, there is a term for it. For the life of me, I just cannot remember what it's called, and I couldn't find what I was looking for when I was searching for it. So if you know what that is called, if you know the term for that, drop it in the comments, let me know, and I'll read it and go, of course. So if you know, please let me know. So the two of them are battling, and Doctor Doom is, pretty tough guy. He's got a lot of weapons, a lot of cool stuff. And this is this situation where Steve Ditko, the artist, and Stan Lee, the writer, are not on the same page. So Doctor Doom is blasting at Spider-Man with his this laser that comes out of his finger from his armor. And you can see what it looks like. So it's sort of this jagged black outline, goes from a yellow to a red, and then sort of explodes when it hits stuff. That's what's happening in this bottom panel. So in the bottom panel, not looking at the dialogue, we're not gonna look at that yet. We're just looking at the visuals. That blast, that dark black jagged outline going from yellow to red, looks like it's hitting Spider-Man in the chest. To me, that's what it looks like, and he's flying backwards from the force of that blast. Again, not reading the dialogue, that's how I would read that image. I would go, oh, he blasted Spider-Man, he caught him, and now Spidey's falling and he's into the water. Okay, no problem. We can write that dialogue. Oh man, he got me. I'm stunned, but if I go limp, I'll be fine. When I hit the water, I'll be okay. And it's sploosh. What Stan writes, though, is just Spidey quipping at Doctor Doom and acting like He chose to jump out the window on his own, backwards for some reason. Seems kind of weird, with his hands up in the air like he got hit. Um, and then explaining here that if he twists and turns, he'll land safely in the water below. And then he lands in the water below, and Doctor Doom's like, "Oh, he escaped me." Now this part here, he escaped me. That part could stay. That dialogue could stay. But these two things really don't make sense with what we're seeing visually in terms of this. So this is where the artist has an idea, and the artist is drawing the story and telling the story. And in his head, I'm guessing, if I had to guess, Steve Ditko probably thought Doctor Doom flipped him. He got him. It's not gonna. It didn't kill him. It stunned him. He'll be all right. Maybe the water revives him, shocks him. He wakes up. It's all good. We'll see. It's all good. But Stan, I don't know if he's trying to protect the character of Spider-Man so that, well, Spider-Man's too fast. He's the hero. He can't get hit by the bad guy. He never would. So we're going to change that dialogue to fit kind of Stan's idea, but it doesn't fit Steve's idea. And these kinds of back and forth, this is a very small one, right? As an artist, you might go, "What are you doing, dude? That's not what I was going for with this image." Is you kind of, but it doesn't kill the story either. There are times when artists have drawn the story and then the writer came in and wrote that dialogue and completely changed the message and the meaning of what the art was, and that breaks up working relationships. And we've seen splits between artists and writers on a comic book series over things like this. So anyway, that's one where the Marvel method kind of doesn't work so great. And the last thing here, this is a coloring error. So you can see there's white. This is to show the water right where it's rippling around in the harbor below. This is the bottom of Spidey's foot. This should be red. The colorist obviously misread this shape because there's these shapes. Maybe I think some of this is glass and window pieces, the water. So they just didn't know what it was and colored it white. Again, not the end of the world, but just something interesting to point out. So let's zoom back out a little bit and get back to this. Okay, so Spidey's okay. Doom he's like, all right, I'm gonna head out. This didn't work. I'll figure something else out. But because he can't leave any traces, he blows up the building he was in so that nobody can get his technology or find him. So boom, he blows it up. Spidey takes some pictures so that he can make some money with the Daily Bugle. And here's where we have that interaction with how much Jameson hates Spider-Man, but Spider-Man sells papers, so he's in a fix. And then we have here the kids are looking and, hey, it's Spider-Man, but if you notice, that costume looks different, and that's because this is Flash Thompson dressing up as Spider-Man. And you can see, interesting little touch, right? Steve Ditko could have drawn it just like he draws Peter in the Spider-Man costume. Flash Thompson is supposed to be super high school athlete, football star, strong. He's in good shape. He's muscular, but the costume isn't the same, and so he draws it a little baggy, which I thought is a real nice subtle touch, and really shows the emphasis that Steve Ditko has on making characters different. A lot of artists would have just drawn this is a guy in a Spider-Man costume, and I've drawn it just like Spider-Man. It's tight to the skin. The muscles are all still there because Spider-Man is not a giant, muscly guy anyway. But Steve Ditko is definitely adamant about drawing characters different. Just in this image here, we see different faces. J. Jonah Jameson's face down in the corner is, he has a wider kind of nose. His chin is very, very different than, say, Peter or Flash. So this is another nice example of Steve's attention to detail and making characters individual. More overlapping, like we talked about, these cables and all this fake whatever technology, really cool. And again, just helps us create that depth, like he's in a vast, large area. Same thing here. You have stuff in the foreground and then him, and then he overlaps this helicopter. So shows us that the helicopter is very large, but in the background, as opposed to that is a very small helicopter. Um, so now Flash is the whole goal of him is he's going to jump out at Peter dressed as Spider-Man, thinking he's going to scare him. That Peter is scared of Spider-Man for some reason, and so, but Doctor Doom is like, "Hey, I found Spider-Man. Great!" So he snags him, and Peter walks on by, never notices a thing because he's not in danger, so his spider sense doesn't go off. And Flash gets kidnapped. So then Doctor Doom tells everybody, "Hey, um, I have Spider-Man. You better, the Fantastic Four better show up and surrender to me, or I'm going to destroy Spider-Man." So Peter, of course, has this dilemma. What is he going to do? And for half a second there, we see what we all would think about is this guy who's been a thorn in my side and a bully my whole life. Man, I could just sit back and do nothing, and that problem takes care of itself. But as we know from Amazing Fantasy 15, with great power comes great responsibility, and Peter can't let somebody else come to harm because of him. So here's what he's got to do. Here's another trope, classic Spidey trope that we see. He has to trick Aunt May. How is he going to get away? He lives in this house with his aunt because he's still a high school student. How is he going to get away without May realizing that he's going off to fight crime as Spider-Man? So he goes down to the fuse box, blows the fuse, or pulls the fuse, and tells her, "Oh, sorry, the fuses went out. I gotta go get some at the store." And she's like, "Okay." So now that gives him his opportunity to go save Flash Thompson. So here's one of the examples I was telling you about with the swinging. So we talked about that one panel where it was really cool. It showed him from behind, and he's flying through the air as he's letting go of the web line. Here he's swinging, and again, a regular person, you'd have to be a Cirque du Soleil kind of acrobat to pull this off, but it's not outside the realm of possibility. It looks like a person holding a rope, and they got to the top of the swing, and right, again, a circus acrobat or something, they might let go, but I compare it to that other one. I think is kind of cool. Here, same thing. While he's sideways, that makes it very exciting and interesting, something you can do. But if you were, again, if you had a circus acrobat or somebody like that holding onto a rope and kind of upside down, not out of the realm of possibility. And we may have all seen those kinds of things on the circus, TV, movies, etc. But so I like that other swinging. The point is, I like the other swinging pose better because it was much more fantastical. So he's swinging around, and this is where the grid format does kind of help a little bit. We haven't seen that exciting large panel of action, of drama. We don't see a lot of close-ups. We don't see a lot of far shots. Everything's kind of in the middle. But here he's swinging around town trying to find, using his spider sense as a radar, if you will, to find out where Doctor Doom is. And so the panel here, the grids show him, so he's here. Now time has lapsed. He's over here. Now he's at another location over there. So he's having a hard time finding him. And for that, the grid works. It shows us the passage of time from a reading perspective. It's good. Not much here. He kind of, just, again, pretty traditional stuff. He goes in through the vents, which is great because he's Spider-Man, so he can get just about anywhere. And now they're going to start fighting again. Also, throughout the whole thing here, again, more overlapping stuff in the foreground, middle ground, background, giving us depth. This device here doesn't have to be there. It doesn't do anything in terms of telling the story, but it does create visual space. This one is nice, having the hand, Doom's hand, so far in the foreground that it is very large. and that beam coming across. That's a nice element there, creating space and depth. And now this page is where we start to see Spidey pull out his bag of web spinning tricks. So again, we've seen lots of lines, lots of nets, wrapping people up, things like that. So here he makes a column to hide behind. He calls it a shield, but to me, it just looks like a column. Yeah, he builds a web column. He says, which is an interesting choice. And then he spins these sort of, I don't know what you call it, sort of a bolo, like a sling, I guess. Like like a David and Goliath, the sling, but with a web ball, and the web ball is full of the liquid web fluid. So when it hits and pops, it's gonna instantly gum up Doctor Doom's finger laser blaster that he's got there in his gauntlet. So we haven't seen that before. That's kind of neat. And then he's doing the same. He's shooting. He's throwing web balls at him. Um, okay, I feel like they would bounce off, but all right. So then Doom has his own tricks, so he keeps triggering trips on him. And here we've got a web shield. So now he has a flat disc shield. That's something that we see a lot over the history of Spider-Man comics. Basically, what we're getting at here with all of these web tricks and things is that Spidey's webs do not obey the laws of physics and can do anything he needs to do. It could be a parachute, it could be a glider. He can make web skis. He can make web balls, shields. I've seen him make a bubble, like a helmet bubble over his head if he's underwater. All this kind of stuff. So we'll see more of that. But this to me feels like one of the first early examples of how we can get his webs to do basically anything we want. And going back to the foreshadowing in the beginning of the book, we saw him practicing. So at least it tells you like this didn't come out of nowhere. Peter has been practicing. He can do these kinds of things. We saw where he's making these shapes and juggling it sort of in his room. This has not come from nowhere. So that's nice storytelling. More traps, and then these pages here again, as I mentioned, the grid really helps tell the pacing of the story. It's moment to moment to moment to moment, and it's happening quickly. So as every trap that Doctor Doom triggers to try to catch Spidey, we have these moments of how is he going to get through it. And he's thinking, he's leaping, he's dodging, he's using his webs, he's jumping, there's fire, so he's got to flip and go through it and over it. He gets electrified. And this is a nice little montage here showing of, even though he's being electrocuted, he's so strong that his muscles don't lock up, so he's able to shoot his web, and now we also find out that apparently his webs are conductive to electricity. Good to know. I've seen times when it's not, he uses them as the webbing as insulators. So again, kind of does whatever you need it to do when you need it to do it, and he uses the electricity to the webbing to create a conduit between him and Doom and zaps Doom. Again, the pacing of the grid panel. Boom, 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 boom. Nice. That works here. Good storytelling for that. Where, we don't see that a lot in today's comics. And then, again, the Doom bot is back. So now Doom has some help. He triggers another trap. Spidey is fighting through the trap. And again, the grid, this pacing of it's action. There's something happening. Boom. It's like, think of the grid like cuts in a video. So if you watch a movie and the action goes, right, think of things like your John Wick movies, your Jason Bourne movies, high speed action movies. You'll have a lot of cuts in those fight scenes. Boom, from this person to that person to back to close up to far to this, and it's pacing and it's in time with the strikes and the beats. That's what we're trying to create here. And it, again, in a two-dimensional image, that's static images, but that's the rhythm that's being created as you move your eyes through the grid pattern. So that's pretty cool. So here, as sort of a last ditch effort, Doctor Doom uses sort of a flash, some sort of flash he thinks to blind Spider-Man. Now he knows about his spider sense because he used it to communicate with him. Yet for some reason he doesn't realize that Spider-Man is going to use his spider sense as radar. And we've seen this in like the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies, where he's trusted it, he closed his eyes and don't believe your eyes. Your spider sense will tell you where the danger is and act that way. And that's exactly what happens here. So Doom can't connect with him because his spider sense, he doesn't need his eyes. It comes down to the end. Spidey slips, but before Doom can finish him off, he realizes that the Fantastic Four are arriving, and so it's too many good guys. So he takes off. Spidey, of course, goes, "Oh, well, all right. The Fantastic Four is here. Aunt May is going to be worrying. I gotta go." So he takes off as well, and now we see another Steve Ditko depiction of the Fantastic Four. You've seen that again in my older videos. The Fantastic Four has shown up in as a group when Spidey tries to join them, thinking that that's how he can make some money. And then he also interacts directly with the Human Torch as well. So they get Flash. I'm sure they bring him home, and everything's cool. And then things aren't great. He doesn't have any new photos because he didn't set up his camera, so that's a bust. And then Flash is here telling everybody about how he was the one that defeated Doctor Doom and was the real hero. And everybody's like, "Boy, you sure are awesome, Flash." And Peter is like, ugh. If he didn't have bad luck, he'd have no luck at all. And that is another trope of Spider-Man, is Peter Parker seems to have bad luck. But I really like this expression in this face, this cartooning here, the eyebrows and the way his eyes are looking to the side, the head on the hand, and how it's kind of pinching the face so the mouth is to the side. Very nice expression. You know exactly what Peter is feeling in this expression. Again, just an ode to Ditko and how great he was at cartooning emotions and faces and character in those faces. So great stuff there. And we're at the end of the book. So let's come back here. So that is a review and sort of a look through of Spider-Man issue number 5, featuring Doctor Doom from the Fantastic Four. Kind of neat, and again, an early example of how Spider-Man and these early comics were designed to be part of a greater world. Today we call it the Marvel Universe. I think the idea was just they based all these comics in the real world. So if the Fantastic Four live in New York City and Spider-Man lives in New York City, then there's a good chance they're going to interact with each other. They're going to come into contact. And we see that down the line. Eventually, we see Spidey has a lot of interactions. He's worked with other superheroes like Daredevil, Punisher, the Avengers, the Fantastic Four. He's been a substitute member of the Fantastic Four a couple times. So it just ties him to that greater universe. And seeing Doctor Doom is another way to do that. Steve Ditko's art, again, is fantastic. I'm looking forward to, as we get further ahead, seeing more of a modern page design layout. Again, today everything is very grid-like and very, in my mind, it's utilitarian. It works to tell the story. But there's when you're the artist drawing a comic book page, you can do anything you want. The world, it's wide open. I could draw a page of, I could draw a whole comic of just splash pages, meaning there's one big image on every page, and people have done that. I could do diagonal panels throughout the whole thing. I could do 20 panels per page, or two, or whatever I want to do. We're not seeing that yet, but it's going to come. So that's what we have to look forward to. Very exciting. The next issue of Amazing Spider-Man number 6, does go back to the concept of introducing another new villain. So a new villain that we haven't seen yet. So that's going to be fun, and another villain that sticks around and has some impact in the Spider-Man, history. So that'll be a fun thing to see, and I look forward to reviewing it with you. So thank you very much for your time and checking out the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please, if you did, like the video, leave me a comment, even if it's just a hi or whatever. I do read all the comments, and I really appreciate them. And if you have something constructive that you want to, hey, hey Jerry, when you next review, take a look at this, talk about color more, or talk about the costume design, or whatever it is you're interested in, let me know, and I'm happy to make any adjustments and get it done so that I'm addressing your questions. So thank you. Like, comment, subscribe to my channel. I'm working to put out these Spider-Man videos every Monday morning, and there's a playlist here on my channel. So if you jumped in late, you can go back and see the earlier ones and enjoy. So thank you so much. I appreciate all of your support, and I look forward to talking to you again on the next Spider-Man art review. Thanks so much.